Support for Destination Michigan is provided by the CMU Bookstore. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, maroon and gold memories, and an official outfitter of Adidas apparel at the Central Michigan University-owned and operated CMU Bookstore. Online shopping 7 days a week at cmubookstore.com. The CMU Bookstore, online at cmubookstore.com, on campus in the University Center, and game day locations at Kelly Short Stadium and the John G. Kohalby Events Center.
Hello everyone, I'm Matthew Ozanek and welcome to Destination Michigan, the series that takes you to every corner of the Great Lakes State in search of the sights, the sounds, and of course the people that define this Michigan experience. Let's take a peek at what we have coming up for you in this episode.
My favorite thing with honeybees is the actual experience on taking care of them.
Stephanie Mills will show us what all of the buzz is about at Sleeping Bear Farms in Beulah.
Oh yeah, I've been to Gaylord. I had to go out and see the elk.
This is approximately a 3-year-old bull elk horn.
Steve Smith is taking us up to Gaylord to pay a visit to their elk park.
We're trying to do our part in protecting the local history, preserving the local history.
We'll head to the West Michigan town of Hastings to discover Historic Charlton Park and learn about the man whose love of collecting was matched only by his love for his hometown.
I love teaching. You've got much more involvement in a student when they're excited about what they're making.
We'll meet the spaces at this pottery studio in Midland, and Bob Garner sits down with craftsman Pat McKee, who's been making all types of objects out of a very rare kind of wood. All of these stories are coming your way on this episode of Destination Michigan. Now, there's no question that we're really shaped by our childhood experiences. Sometimes we're led by example. We all have role models. And sometimes we're led by very distinct memories that can have a lasting, profound impact. And that was the case for Kirk Jones of Beulah. Kirk is the owner of Sleeping Bear Farms, and it was his childhood growing up on the Louisiana bayous that gave him a certain buzz that's led him to create some of the nation's best tasting honey that's produced right here in northern Michigan. So Stephanie Mills is going to take us up to Beulah and introduce us to Kirk and give us a tour of Sleeping Bear Farms.
Honeys are like grapes. People are familiar with like Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, honeys are very similar. They come from different terroirs, and our local star thistle is it makes a beautiful, light, mild honey that has just many people in the country have become fans of this honey.
While most of us tend to avoid bees, not Kirk Jones. After nearly 40 years of beekeeping and probably billions of bee stings, he knows a thing or two about looking after them and how to make some seriously sweet honey.
My favorite thing with honeybees is the actual experience on taking care of them. We look at ourselves as stewards to help the bees stay alive, especially nowadays with all the problems. And going in and working bees, it's romanticized somewhat, but it's very hard work. It's in the hot sun, and generally you have your veil on and your little extra suit for protection, depending on their mood. Every different bloom of flowers through the year has a different smell, and you can see the different color pollen coming in. And we used to trap the pollen, and I could just scoop out the pollen and eat handfuls of it.
Kirk's love for bees started long before he began making honey. Fortunately, he found the perfect partner to share his passion with.
When I was young, we lived down in Louisiana, and it was in the country, and it was around the bayous, and we'd spend our days out in the woods, hunting turtles and scooping up fish and crawfish, and one day we ran into a big log full of bees. We could hear it in the distance, and we went and explored and found this big log, and we looked inside and we could see the bee combs hanging. And ever since then, I've always wanted to get some honeybees. Well, I met my wife Sharon in like '78. We fell in love, we got married, and we decided that we bought this little log cabin. I saw an ad one day, and I said, "Hey Sharon, look, some beehives for sale." She goes, "Well, why don't you go buy them and bring them home?"
And he did. They started off with 2 hives. Today, they have about 7,000. Fall is a very busy time around here. We caught up with Kirk when his crew was harvesting the honey. The barn is literally packed to the brim with hives brought in from the surrounding areas and counties.
Back in the day, beekeepers, they had skeps, and it was like a straw-shaped basket. And they could make honey, but at the end of the year, they would have to chase all the bees out of it and harvest the honey. Well, back in the 1800s, there was a brilliant, and they were mostly clergymen, the beekeepers. They figured out a way to make combs that you could pull out. So now all our equipment is in these modern hives, and you can pull the combs out. So what we do when the hives are starting to make honey, we stack on boxes, as they fill them, we put another box on. Well, at this time of year, we got a couple crews out, and they'll take the boxes off, and they stack them in the bee barn. And then they go into this stainless steel device that cuts the combs off, like the little wax cappings that protects the honey and keeps it fresh. And then it goes into this big spinner, and the honey's flung out. And then we put it into buckets and jars.
During a really good year, they could get 600 to 700 drums of honey. Once all the honey is harvested, the crew prepares the bees for winter and ships around a dozen semi-loads of them to California to help the almond growers. They also ship their bees to their farm in Florida, where they produce a specialty honey called Tupelo. With all the success, they've also had their share of hardships over the years. Bees are still struggling with colony collapse and mites, and at Sleeping Bear Farms, they continue to adapt to make sure their hives are as healthy as possible.
A beekeeper uses all their senses. You can tell without thinking of it so much. You can hear them, and do they sound right? Do they look right? They have a certain smell. Do they smell right? And it just all happens naturally with experience.
Very little goes to waste at Sleeping Bear Farms because the honey that they create has many more uses than just for food and drinks. It also has a lot of cosmetic uses and medicinal uses, as does the raw beeswax that they also produce. Now, if we have any avid hunters watching, I would venture to guess that a elk hunt somewhere far out west might be somewhere on your bucket list. But did you know that if you wanted to get up close and personal with these majestic creatures, you can do so in one of our favorite northern Michigan communities? Destination Michigan Steve Smith is going to take us up to Gaylord as we visit their elk park.
Very seldom do I ever drive in this parking lot and not see a car parked out there looking at the elk. People can come in and have a little picnic and watch the elk.
On a weekend, it's nothing to see 50 people along the fence here, any time of day.
The elk park started with a gift of 5 elk from Project Nature. Today, 32 elk and 15 fallow deer attract spectators from far and wide to Gaylord.
I talk to people all over the crazy country, or the state, basically. Oh yeah, I've been to Gaylord. I had to go out and see the elk, and where they come, they had to come over here. It's really quite an amazing sight. I was here this morning and standing outside, and I got to see 2 elk fighting. It looked like they're in heat and they're fighting each other and bugling and everything else. And it's quite 7:30 in the morning. It's really quite an interesting sound to hear. Oh, gee, they're fighting again.
They can be very docile, but they're a typical wild animal. You got to keep your eye on them. Well, we had one that was a real friendly sort of elk, and she chewed the visors out of this truck right here.
Ed says the elk are family-like, except in the fall when the bulls begin their rut. He's even had some of the animals eat out of his hand. The 108-acre park provides another national claim to fame for the local Elks Lodge.
It's kind of ironic. When the city decided to put the elk herd in, a couple of our members were on the Board of Commissioners. And I'm sure they were pushing to get the elk here because it's kind of a nice match. We have the elk sitting here and we got the Elks Lodge, so we get to be known as the only Elks Lodge in the country that has elk outside the door that are 4-feeted elk. We do kind of keep tabs on the elk, even though we don't really have any responsibility for them. There's always somebody out there keeping an eye on them and looking at them.
These animals, these are all full grown. They can be anywhere. The females can get up to 500 to 600 pounds and the males can get up to around 800 pounds.
During our visit, the bulls were dropping their antlers, which can weigh 50 pounds or more. It's part of the natural cycle, but the racks will grow back even bigger by next September.
The antlers, they're on their heads all the time. The new ones virtually push the old ones off. This is mid-March right now, and the old ones are coming off, and some of the bulls that have dropped them a week ago, you can already start to see the new horn coming. This is approximately a 3-year-old bull elk horn. How you can tell, the older they get, the base of the antler here becomes bigger diameter. In this spot, it becomes a bigger diameter, and these also. This is only a 4-point. When they get to be about 4 to 5 years old, it'll be a 5-point rack, and then older than that, you can get up to 6 or 7. But usually they're 5 is a natural.
The Gaylord Elk Park is a must-see for your family. The elk love the attention, and they seem content with the care Ed and the community provide.
We've had the gate open to feed them, and they'll walk out, but they always come back in, because that's where their feed is at. We just keep upgrading it and make it easier for them. We've installed waterers for them, feeders, stuff like that, just to make it easier on them. This is like a retirement home for them.
The guys at the Elk Park tell us that there's currently a webcam in the works, so that way you can keep an eye on these beautiful elk right from the comfort of your very own home. Now for our next story, we're going to head to the West Michigan town of Hastings. Nestled along the Thornapple River is Historic Charlton Park, and over the generations it's become a real gathering place for the entire community. But none of it would have been possible without the generosity and vision of one of Hastings' favorite sons, a man who made it his life's work to preserve his hometown's histories. This is Irving Charlton, and he was a true Renaissance man who devoted his life to education, which included teaching the electrical trade to veterans returning home from the First World War. His storied life had taken him all across the map, but his heart never left Berry County.
He grew up around here, not actually that far from here, up the road. He donated the first 200 acres we have to Berry County in 1936 with the intention that a museum would be built here and a recreation area for the people of the community to enjoy. He didn't collect the fancy things, he collected kind of the everyday things. The junkier the better for Irving, and he'd go to the dumps too and pick up things. The lore was that he collected 150,000 artifacts in his lifetime.
And many of those artifacts can still be found at the park. Some are showcased here in the Irving D. Charlton Historical Museum, and others are strewn about the 25 historic buildings that have been given a second chance at life at the park. They include a blacksmith shop, a bank, and a number of residences. Even the buildings themselves are treated as artifacts by the hard-working team that's dedicated to keeping this beautiful park alive.
They're antiques. Yep, I realize it's a structure, but they're antiques. And we took the approach a few years ago that we wanted to try to protect them as part of our overall collections too. We're trying to do our part in protecting the local history, preserving the local history, whether it be from artifacts that are on display here or in this particular instance in the structures that we have in place.
We provide somewhat of a snapshot of this area at about the turn of the century. What we want people to take away is what their ancestors had to do in order to survive and thrive here. We try to hold in our collection that kind of cultural patrimony of the community. One of the largest collections that we have is our agricultural implements. And I mean, that's one of the biggest industries in this area right now too. So really, our collection kind of mirrors what historically the community centered around.
One item at the center of the community was this clock that chimed for years in the heart of Hastings. And now it lives here at the park. And after a little bit of work, it's still ticking all these years later.
Well, the clock is an O.B. McClintock clock, and it's sitting outside of the Hastings Mutual Insurance Company building. Hastings City Bank offered us their clock in 1986, and this clock used to be wall-mounted on the corner of their building, corner of their brick building. Our restorer did a fabulous job on it, and now it runs. All the clock faces are the same. It really is a showpiece for us, which is what it should be if you have it on your logo, and it's also significant because those in the community that where it used to hang remember being able to set their watches to it.
Walking around the park, you feel yourself slipping back to a simpler time, a slower time. And in this modern age of constantly changing trends and technology, there's just something calming about this place. And you can't help but to be thankful for Irving Charlton's generous spirit.
He never envisioned this for the park, but given his love of educating, we think he'd be pretty excited that it's still here. We're still fulfilling his mission, which was education, and he wanted to educate, and we've expanded on that too, because we have, all the buildings now to continue to teach young people about the early settlers in this area in Berry County. I think he'd be really pleased with how the property is being used.
I may be having a gloomy day, but I could sit in my office or walk out into the village today and see 80 to 100 school-aged children running around, laughing, screaming, doing all the things that kids do, and it really makes it fun. And with that, there's a huge responsibility, and it's trying to ensure that we're doing the things that make everything fun for everyone. What experience they take away probably is dependent on what they're here for, because there are so many different things that you can experience in this wonderful setting.
There are a lot of great events happening all throughout the year at Historic Charlton Park, including my favorite, which is their Civil War reenactments they hold each summer. And if you want to stay up to date on all the other events going on at the park, just visit their website, charltonpark.org. Now, a strong sense of community is also at the forefront of our next story. If you've ever driven on that stretch of M20 just west of Midland, you may have noticed a building that stands out from all the rest. Well, it belongs to Kathy and Stephen Space, and they are two incredibly creative individuals who wanted to create a space in their own hometown that really nurtures creativity and fosters a community of shared learning. So we're gonna hop in the car and head out to Midland to spend a day with the Spaces at Space Studios.
You know how they say you learn through teaching? That's how I learned pottery, because I just had no idea. I always thought it was just about wheel throwing, and I was not interested in making perfectly round things. Being creative and stuff like that was, to me, that was restricting. And then when I could see what you could do with your hands outside of the wheel, I was hooked.
And now Kathy has made it her mission to get others hooked on pottery. In this funky building just west of Midland, Kathy and Stephen Space have provided the community with an inspiring home. A home where potters can come together and immerse themselves in their creative addiction.
It's a great idea.
Kathy actually began teaching pottery out of her basement, but eventually she had so many students, they decided it was time to expand.
So I asked him, would it be okay if we bought a kiln, wheels and everything else? Not a small outlay of cash, you know what I mean? And you said, sure.
Yep, and we started it in our basement, in our home, and it got too big, and so we built the building.
It does. Careful, your hand separate from your other hand. Always keep your hands together. When we teach people how to make things in clay, we actually want them to tell us what they want to make. Meet with the person, find out if they had prior experience, and then ask them what are they excited about. What would you like to see yourself make in clay? And as we work on their projects, I can teach them the techniques. You've got much more involvement in a student when they're excited about what they're making. Like if somebody comes in and they're a total beginner and they say, I want to throw a vase on the wheel this big, we're like, that's a great goal. But let's just start small and build your skill level so that you will be able to throw that vase in about a year. And then once you get really established in it, you don't really need sessions anymore. You just need time to develop your skills.
And there is a lot of skill in this building. Kathy has brought together artists from areas like Midland and Mount Pleasant to take part in this creative venture.
He has a rummage sale at his house with all of the Clay Club members, and they sell their pottery.
Together with old art teachers and old friends, they share what they've learned, different techniques and different ways to think about art. In a space like this, everyone learns from everyone else. And Kathy says that's just the way potters like it.
Some art forms, everybody's very antisocial about. They don't want to share their techniques. They want to keep it to themselves. Potters are not like that. In the pottery community that I've experienced anyway, everybody shares. They find a technique, they can't wait to share it with somebody else. Better way to reclaim clay, better way to make a glaze, better way to run a kiln. Everybody shares.
The process of learning can go on forever. You can never learn it all.
You can't, you just can't. But I like that challenge. And I also like the way it feels in your hands and the way you can take that feeling and then from there, it can be art on a wall or a bowl on your table.
As the clay starts getting thrown, the studio comes alive. When you have 5 potter's wheels all spinning at once, it can get pretty noisy. But these potters find a way to tune all of that out and just let their creativity flow from their fingertips. You can see the concentration on their faces as they meticulously form the clay, and in what feels like the passing of a moment, a beautiful piece of art is born.
I want people to get how I feel when I'm working with the clay. It becomes very personal. It's really, really rewarding because now I don't feel so alone in my addiction. If I get somebody else addicted to it, I don't feel so like, why can't I stop doing this?
Many of them graduate to going off and buying their own wheels and buying their own kilns and taking it all into their homes.
We've had quite a few students do that, and they ask me lots of questions, you know, how to work the kiln. It is not important to us that they stay and keep using us. I just love seeing them grow and get a medium that they can enjoy. I love sharing that experience in clay. I just love it.
Kathy offers pottery workshops for everybody 8 years old and up. But if you've got a creative itch and maybe you don't want to get your hands too dirty, you can paint one of their pre-made pieces of pottery. Now for our final story, we're going to tag along with our dear friend Bob Garner, and he's heading up to Petoskey to sit down with his friend and artist Pat McKee. Pat is an exceptional craftsman that makes these beautiful and functional pieces out of a very unique type of wood. And it's not the kind of wood that you are going to find in any hardware store.
The Great Lakes abound with shipwrecks, something that's always sparked the imagination of Petoskey resident Pat McKee. Flying around the Great Lakes with his pilot father, many of them were easily visible. But things really changed for Pat the day the 3-masted schooner, the Lark, washed ashore in Leelanau County all the way back in 1978. How do you find out that the Lark has washed ashore?
I think it was Christmas Day, and it was late at night, and the news came on, and I had a dream about a week before I thought, oh God, imagine finding a ship on the beach, you know, what you've always wanted. And the picture that I saw almost was identical to what came on the news. They said, today in Leland, a ship from the old 1800s came up on the beach. And I just looked at that and I was in awe.
But it didn't end there. It only started there.
Yeah.
And you just can't go salvage. Nowadays, you couldn't salvage anything.
Today,
right?
no. Back then, if you got with the DNR and you told what you were going to do and you talked to the people in the township, and they'd give you a permit. And that's what I did.
What's it like working with wood that's, you figure, 260 years old?
Yeah, plus the fact that it's been underwater for 110 years, so it's pretty much saturated with sand, seaweed smell. The color, the black color comes a lot from the nails that rot away in it, so they leave this black look. It's very rough on tools. When you go to plane it, you just destroy all your blades. You just have to replace blades. Very, very heavy wood.
It's sod, right?
It's solid oak. It was all oak.
Yeah, and it's wet.
Yeah, I had to wait about a year and a half. Let it dry for a year and a half, just to get, because you're in the center. You'd even sometimes think it was dry, and get into one and find out the core is still soaking wet. So you'd have to let that sit for another 6 months or whatever. You know, it was a slow process.
What did you see in the wood? What did you see to do with the wood?
It
took you a long time, didn't it? To do something
yeah. I saw the history, and my dad taught me a lot about it, how to work with it and do the things. But I just thought, this is a real piece of history. I was always a boat fanatic when I was a kid and stuff, and I thought, this is how things got done around here. They were in these ships, and this was a part of Michigan that you don't think about that much anymore.
Now I see out in your garage you're doing a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, that's a lot.
What are the plans out there? What are you doing?
Well, you know, I like to donate a lot of this stuff to charities if I can at the right time, the right place.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to do with it right now. I've got way more out there to finish. Basically, all clocks. I mean, I might be able to get a couple tables. I'm not sure, but. I've just had it for so long, and I just like seeing it do something for someone else.
But this looks like the seed that it's magic with it.
Right, and it did. That's how you get these wear spots. These wear spots are created from the water doing this and moving the nails. The nails hold, and then they make those holes from the movement. And then eventually, sometimes they'll come off, and then that's how they get away from the ship.
Jeez. and the clocks. I mean, it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. I mean, it's kind of like a grandfather.
Well, it's grandfather style as far as size, but as far as their typical grandfather clock, you know, chain legs and a flat face and all that. But again, it's the color, it's the history of it, you know, the age. It's just timeless.
You put a ton of work into this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Storing it, moving it, working with it. But it's so worth it. You know, where else can you get a piece of history like that?
Well, that's going to wrap things up for us on this episode of Destination Michigan, and from all of us here, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Now you can enjoy the Destination Michigan experience anytime, anywhere, online. Just go to pbs.org or download the PBS app to your smartphone or tablet. Search Destination Michigan and relive all of your favorite stories from our beloved Great Lakes state.